Whether you're home or away, stay connected to your team with T-Mobile, the network that covers 99% of people in America. They've been investing billions to light up their best network ever. From your backyard to a sold-out stadium, get T-Mobile's best coverage yet. Plus, with T-Mobile, you get a price lock guarantee, so they won't raise the rate of your talk, text, and data, ever. There's never been a better time to switch. Visit your local T-Mobile store today. Coverage not available in some areas. Price lock exclusions like taxes, fees, select promos, and third-party services apply. See T-Mobile.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Final Four is Not on the Schedule. I'm your host Eric, alongside with expert analyst Rod. Thanks for joining us on the best MSU basketball podcast featuring an in-depth recruiting, game matchup, and post-game analysis. We dive deep to give you the best tools to enjoy the Spartans and impress your friends and family. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod. We're here to talk about Nebraska. Post-game show as Michigan State visited Nebraska and Lincoln and defeated the Cornhuskers 80-67 after a scintillating second half against the Cornhuskers. Before we begin, I just want to remind you, if you want to support the show, we have all this extra content we bring for you. Rod has a new microphone. This show's been upgraded. There are lots of things we've done. And so we really appreciate the support you've given us. There are two ways you can support us. You can go to our support page at thefinalfoursontheschedule.com/support. You can do one-time or a recurring monthly gifts. Thanks so much to the Scott Skiles, Draymond Green, and Mateen Cleaves donors. We really appreciate what you guys are doing and keeping our show on the air. And also, if you want to buy merchandise, either our hoodies or our t-shirts through Nudge Printing, you can go to finalfoursontheschedule.com/merchandise. You can do a little tab up at the right-hand corner and just select the merchandise tab. You pick either the t-shirt or the hoodie. It sends you to Nudge Printing. All the proceeds from those shirts go to our show. So that's another way of supporting the show. And you get a cool shirt. I've got the hoodie. It's awesome. And I'm going to be wearing it in a couple days at the Ohio State game as I go shoot free throws. I've still been practicing. So before I even begin, I think sometimes at halftime, when things aren't going well, I just get frustrated. I think I'm just going to write the synopsis of the game for the podcast, and then we'll just watch the rest of the game. So I'm just going to read what I wrote because I think it's pretty funny. So MSU traveled to Lincoln for a rematch against Cornhuskers, who had been on quite a tear recently, and continued again tonight as they defeated Michigan State X-X. The game was decided early as the Spartans were unable to hit any shots from the field and had one stretch that lasted over 8 minutes without a field goal. Despite being an excellent three-point shooting team, MSU missed wide open three after wide open three and fell behind to a raucous crowd on senior night. More concerning was the weak defense played by the Spartans, allowing the Huskers to score 38 points in the first half. Well, of course, that's all moot now. But it is. I do think in some ways it does tell you a little bit about the game. So Michigan State scores 26 points in the first half. Miserable shooting.
Had to rally late. Late to get that high.
Right.
I was gonna say, is there anybody listening to this? Because I can't raise my hand. Who thought when it looked like Michigan State would struggle to hit 20 by halftime, and they were going to end this game with 80?
Oh, I turned my wife at the end of the game. I said, I don't know what odds you'd have to give me. 20, 100 to 1, I'm not quite sure, to say that the chance of them scoring 80 points. I don't know that I would have ever taken that bet for any amount of money. So, Michigan State finishes the game scoring 54 points in the second half, outscoring Nebraska, and actually just cruised into a win, surprisingly, after they passed them 54-29 in the second half, and just shot the lights out in the second half. And Michigan State shot 12 of 17 for three for 70.59%. And actually, in the first half, despite really missing everything, they were 4 of 12 because they hit threes at the end, like you mentioned, at the first half to just stay in contact with Nebraska. So they shot 33%, which is respectable out of 12. But just they were. And I will say this too, my favorite announcer, and maybe I'm all alone in this, is I love Sean Morris. He's like my favorite BTN guy.
Not.
And his line where he said, usually when you see a drought like this, Willie Nelson shows up and gives a concert. I mean, he has these country sort of folksisms. I just love it. I just love his analysis is smart, and he's really entertaining without being over the top like a lot of these guys are.
Absolutely. He does not get and never has gotten nearly enough credit. And I was thinking to myself, when I found out who was doing the game, he may have done another MSU game this year, but I can't recall. He certainly has not done as many as we're used to seeing. You usually see him more frequently than they have this year. That would be my takeaway, because I've really noticed the broad. Let's just put it this way: with Fox really wading in an ever more serious fashion into college basketball, broadcasting talent's getting spread mighty thin, really thin, and I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I swear to God, I had that same thought when I found out he was going to be doing the game just before tip. That, oh, great, because I couldn't recall if we've heard him yet this year. But yeah, it makes for an enjoyable game. And actually, when you think about the Big Ten Network, you have two guys the caliber of Sean Morris and Robbie Hummel.
Yes.
They're pretty well served. And even the guys who aren't quite at that level, Stephen Bardo is not my favorite.
He's pretty good though.
But by national standards, he's generally okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Big Ten Network does just fine in that regard.
Yeah.
But anyway, getting back to the game. I thought that the first half looked to me like, listeners hopefully remember, we talked to Mike Garland about this after the Iowa game. And we asked him, how do you deal with this as a coach? Do you pump them up? Do you go over the mistakes and say, these are the things we've got to correct? Or is it a combination? And he said, it'd be a combination of the two. And then we further, from that, we asked a follow-up question and said, as a coach, when do you know? And he said, we're not going to know until tip.
Yep.
Well, I thought what we saw in that first half was a team that lacked confidence, certainly offensive.
Certainly Walker too,
because
right? I felt like of all of them, he looked like it the most.
Yeah, because not only were they getting good shots, here's what I thought happened. They got some really good looks early and kept missing.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I thought guys, and Tyson would be top of that list, but he wasn't the only guy. I thought they were very hesitant after that to take threes that were reasonably good looks. I'm not saying they were passing on wide open threes, but they definitely were gun shy.
Yep.
And that's a confidence thing, and you can't. So I suspect that was sort of a result in some ways of not having fully gotten past the Iowa game. Now I can't, I'm armchair psychoanalyzing this stuff. It can be as simple as, hey, you just didn't make shots, which happens. But you look at that, and then, man, defensively, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because I have not seen one little bit of social media in this game because of the way that first half went. Oftentimes I'll look at.
Oh, you don't want to look, yeah.
I know. And and the thing is, if someone was just criticizing the performance on its merits, absolutely. There was nothing to do but criticize. I imagine a lot of it went much, much further than that, which is the stuff that I always have a problem with. But it looked to me like a team. I honestly was wondering, boy, guys, are we going to be able to find it again this year? Because as we talked about, this team's had to deal with so many things.
Yes.
That were out of their, some that were out of their control, and some that were, like Iowa, things that they contributed mightily to, that honestly, you couldn't blame them in some respects if it really affected them that much. And I just thought the hesitation offensively and just the complete lack of execution defensively. I mean, they got outplayed every which way you can be.
Yeah.
They were late on 3-point shooters. They got back cut to death. Really, the only thing Nebraska didn't really work them on that much was the low post game. But everything else, Michigan State was just horrendous defensively in that first half. And so my thinking going into halftime was, one, it's a miracle they're only down 12.
Yeah.
Really, because they played so badly. If that had been, let's say, and if that had been Iowa, especially the way Iowa's playing offensively right now, or that had been Purdue,
They've been 30 points.
They would have been down 20 plus. Yeah. I mean, I think Nebraska played well offensively, but a better team would have cut Michigan State up even worse. So the first thought was, thank God they're only down 12. And then my second thought was, I'm betting they're going to hit more shots in the second half. Can they get better defensively? Because here's something that you and I have not spent a lot of time focusing on, and we should have. Lately, I mean, over the course of the season, Michigan State's been a pretty damn good defensive team.
Mm-hmm.
Lately, they have not been. At least not consistently. They were good against Indiana, reasonably good, not great. They were not good at all against Michigan. We know what they were against Iowa. So there's been a little slippage over the last week and a half that is concerning, because this is not the time of year you want to see that. And then that first half performance did nothing but buttress that thought in my mind that I don't know if they're going to be able to get it back, because it was so comprehensive that it wasn't like you could focus on one thing and say, boy, the guy in the post is just killing them. They got to start bringing more help, or, they're letting penetrate. I mean, to a man, that's something else they were horrible at. Horrible dribble penetration defense.
Straight line drives, everything.
The possession where Griesel grabs the rebound or got the outlet pretty quickly after rebound and basically goes baseline to baseline without anybody picking him up. I mean, it was just comprehensively bad. And so that was my thought, is if they can figure out and get back to guarding the way that they've guarded most of the season, they'll have a chance. And they did that. And then it helped, of course, that they were blistering hot offensively. But I'll tell you something. And I saw Tom Izzo's post-game interview, and he mentioned just how the thing he takes away from it is that his guys just keep responding. They keep getting off the mat after they take these heavy-duty body blows.
Yeah.
And I think that's the conclusion you have to reach in this game. But I'll tell you what was huge for me. Really huge. And you can look at the whole second half that way. But to me, the biggest thing was MSU got it down to 3 with fairly early in the half. I can't remember exactly.
Probably 15 minutes left. Yeah, they got it.
And then Nebraska went on a 7-0 run that was capped by Tominaga hitting a 3 that he released and then looked away. He knew it was going in. Yeah. And it just felt, even to a deep Michigan State fan like me, I'll be honest, my reaction seeing that was, it's one of those nights.
Yep, that was mine.
I thought
too.
that Michigan State had really played very, very well, especially offensively in the beginning of that half to get back in it. And then just the roof caved in for about a minute and a half or 2 minutes, and bam, it's right back up to double digits. And from there, they took over. They did not let that take them out, which, you had reason to wonder if that's what would happen. And instead, they got even better defensively. I thought that they were vastly better in terms of denying dribble penetration.
Oh, yeah.
They clearly did a much, much better job with Tominaga in terms of locating him. And you saw tonight, I mean, it's the things we talked about. He takes shots that are out of rhythm, and he's also got such a quick release that if you are not there on the catch, literally on the catch, and he's got a sliver of a window to get a shot off, he's gonna get it off. And right now, the way he's playing, they're gonna drop, right?
Yeah, well, they did. So, yeah.
Michigan State was much better in that way. I thought they were really good in when Nebraska would look to drive, would look to take the ball to the rim. A lot of good help defense caused some timely turnovers. They had several of those that I thought came in big moments where Michigan State was able to use it as not necessarily a backbreaker, but again, body blows the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were pretty damn good the way they handled Walker. Post guys were reasonably solid. The ones he made were pretty much all tough shots. They didn't give him a lot that was easy.
I would say that the post play, even when they weren't playing good defense, was good. Like, that was the one part that was not breaking down much. They were just getting exposed because of just poor play everywhere else and on defensively.
So, yeah, those guys were the fives were solid. Cooper didn't play, so it was Marty who played most of the game, and then Jackson a little bit. But the help was good too. They had good dig downs in the second half, not as much in the first. In the first, Walker was able to find some stuff out of those doubles.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't think Michigan State's rotations and recovery was as good as it needed to be. You know, so all of that really turned around. And then obviously, you know, everyone's going to focus on the 3-point shooting. And when you go 12 for 17 and a half, rightly so, but you got to really give a tip of the cap to AJ Hoggard.
Yes.
And Izzo said it in his post-game interview too. He said Hoggard came into the locker room and told Izzo, that's the worst I've played. And I don't know if it's the worst he's played, but he wasn't great. And that's at both ends. I thought he really struggled defensively in the first half. Lawrence took him to the rim a couple times where he just didn't square him up.
Yeah, right.
He gave him an angle. Yeah. And so AJ came out in the second half and took that game over. Yes, guys needed to make shots, and they did. That's all important. But it was something Sean Morris mentioned on a couple of occasions. Hoggard was making, and we've talked about this, Hoggard was making passes into a shooter's pocket. And it is so important. It's not just about swinging the ball to a guy. It's getting the guy the ball, the shooter the ball, in a spot where he can go directly into his shot.
Yep.
So then it's just mechanics. You're not having, all right, I catch the ball at my waist. I got to bring it up. Or I'm going over my head to reel it in. You know, AJ was putting the ball on the money. And that's a really good way to help your shooters out and increase the likelihood that you're going to start making shots. And that's what happened. The other thing, well, we'll talk about in the keys, but the other thing that I thought was really good throughout the game, both ends, Michigan State responded to what's been a problem for a lot of recent games and really rebounded. Yeah.
I would say with those point guards and with the way AJ was passing, there is a certain level of confidence that you can pass a ball to someone. Like, you know, I don't know, I don't even know how you'd even sort of measure it, but you can definitely feel like when the guy's passing you the ball, like he expects you to make that shot. And the way AJ was passing it, it was right, absolutely in the right spot for in the shooter's pocket. But it was also, I don't know if it was like he was just like confidently throwing to people. And so I think there is something that, and then of course a couple drop, and then you really start feeling like every time he tosses someone, they're gonna score. So I think again, you know, I feel like that this leadership sort of whatever it is actually starting to emerge a little bit in AJ. I know he's had some, you know, off and on, but he's been generally pretty good over the last few games.
Well, according to Izzo, I mean, he was the guy that Izzo mentioned,
right,
and called out. And I think when you look at the way that he played, you have to acknowledge how critical he was to what they did. And you're absolutely right about confidence. And we see it is a fragile thing. Michigan State lacked all confidence in the first half, I think largely coming out of what happened to them in Iowa City. At least that's my read.
Sure.
They found it in the second half and it just snowballed.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's when you combine that with guys that have particular skills, and this is a very good jump shooting team for Michigan State. That's just reality.
Mm-hmm.
They're one of the best jump shooting teams in the country, as a matter of fact. That's objective truth. So when you combine confidence with that, boy, you can get things like this. You can get a half where it just snowballs. We saw it with Iowa, a team that has not been nearly as good a shooting team as Michigan State, except at home, obviously, they're significantly better.
Yeah. And
they found that confidence. And if you don't think that's real and that has an impact on performance, you're out of your mind.
Yeah. Ask
we
Indiana.
Absolutely saw it with Iowa. Yeah. Again tonight for Iowa. But particularly, I'm talking about down the stretch against Michigan State regulation, where they just could not miss.
Yeah.
And it got to the point that even when MSU contested one of those shots really well, the one that McCaffrey hit, he still hit it because of, in part, because of confidence. And you saw that in the second half tonight from Michigan State when they got rolling. And you got a point guard out there that's orchestrating things the way he was, and guys just feed off of all of that, and it becomes to use a business term, a virtuous cycle. It's just the positives keep feeding on the positives, just like it can go the other way.
Sure, yeah. Well, and if you look at AJ's line, you'd say, well, 4 for 11, that's not great. 0 for 1 from 3, pair of free throws,
Don't care.
3 rebounds, but 14 assists, only 1 turnover, and that was. And then he also had a steal, and he finished with 10 points. But I mean, like you said, he's the one who was the difference in that. At least he was instrumental in getting them back, and maybe it's just that adding that confidence, which is that's what a point guard is supposed to do in the Tom Izzo system. Joey Hauser,
and he was before we leave, AJ, don't overlook his improvement in the second half defensively as well.
Right? Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
I thought. Lawrence really took advantage of him, and so did Griesel at times in that first half. And in the second half, for the most part, those guys got shut down.
Yeah.
AJ was much, much better.
Joey Hauser finishes at 20 points, 6 for 11 from 3, and just 7 rebounds, 1 of them offensive, 2 assists and a turnover. Tyson Walker, 19 points, 2 assists, 3 turnovers, and 3 for 4 from 3, 6 for 13 from the field. Had that dagger 3 at the end that just totally finished the game.
I was good. Well, it was there was a 2-point shot though.
Oh yeah,
that I think was the biggest.
Oh, the one off the inbound with 1 second or something.
Yes. And I was going to say, you want to talk about the effect of confidence?
Right. Yeah.
There it is.
Right, because that shot he's missing in the first half, right?
Right, from a guy in the first half who was missing far better looks, and then as a result of that, seemed hesitant to take them.
Yep.
To take anything. To that, you see the turnaround.
Yeah.
But yeah, just a huge performance.
And Akins was fantastic. He was, I think, 1 for 4 in the first half, and then 4 for 5 in the second half for 3. And he finished with 17 points and only 1 rebound. Malik Hall, okay game. He had 8 points. Defensively, he was good. Again, second half, that's always the caveat we're talking about. When somebody having a good game, it's always in the second half. Although I do think Mady Sissoko played well. He brought great energy, even right from the tip.
He absolutely
did.
And
he was the only guy who seemed like unaffected by the Iowa game in some respects. He seemed like he was in it. Good screens and rebounding well. He had 4 offensive rebounds, and he also had another one that they didn't credit for him. That was 1 or 2 of them that were like out of bounds rebound, sideline rebounds that were offensive. And also plays that he kept alive that somebody else got exactly.
The rebound by batting it out. No, he was really good. And again, Derek Walker scores 13 points, and the numbers are 6 for 9 from the floor. So he produced.
He was 5 for 5,
but he only had 5 right. So the second half again much better, and he only had 5 boards. The fact is, the number that I pay attention to is the 9. Not the 6.
Right. He
didn't get the kind of shot attempts that we've seen him get in earlier games against Michigan State,
Yep. And 3 turnovers. So those are the digging you're talking about earlier that was harassing him.
Right. Really good job by Mady. I really liked the game he had. No question.
And Jackson was really good too. Kohler had 4 rebounds, 2 offensive rebounds, a couple buckets.
Had one of them a putback at
2 blocks.
An important point. I liked Jackson's minutes. He didn't get exploited defensively. I thought he hung in there. There was one possession, and it wasn't Walker. It was somebody else that had the ball in the post, and Jackson came over late to apply a double, and it forced a turnover. And I thought that was a moment that stuck out to me defensively, that he recognized it, because I don't know if it was an automatic decision for him to come on that, but he came, and because of his length, because of his size, forced a turnover. So I think both those guys, the numbers don't knock you out, but man, they were in there. They competed, and you can make an argument that Michigan State absolutely. I would make the argument Michigan State got what they needed.
Yeah.
Out of that position
and
in total.
And you can definitely feel that the rotation tightening as we're getting closer to the end of the season. Brooks plays 4 minutes. Trey Hallman plays 4 minutes. They're both fine. I mean, they didn't do much because his first half, Michigan State didn't do anything anywhere in the game. And then, as far as Nebraska, well, I guess we'll get to in the keys of the game, but I think, Tominaga, that guy
I want
is
to make
good.
I want to make a comment. I want to make a comment about that before we move on, though. And it's here's one for the geniuses who say that we're never critical. I am going to offer one piece of criticism relative to those guys you just mentioned, that I would like to see Izzo adjust. I don't know that he will. There was a stretch in that first half where I think it was when the game was tied at 10. And I believe, if I've got it right, Michigan State at that point inserted, they had Jackson Kohler, Trey Holloman, and Pierre Brooks all out there at the same time. And I think they had maybe Walker and Hall or Walker and Hauser out there with them. So it wasn't as if they had no offensive weapons, but Michigan State was really struggling offensively at that time. And look, I understand you've got to get guys some blows. You have to. Mm-hmm. So you have to play those guys at least a little bit. I personally would wonder if they might be better suited to mix that a little bit. So play Trey, but not at the same time you're playing Pierre and Jackson.
Right. Not bring the second team in and then you have the first team out.
Right.
Yeah, right.
That you mix it up and you get guys rest that way. But that's about, that's just a thought that occurred to me watching this game, because when I saw that lineup out there, I didn't love it from that perspective, because even though Michigan State had pulled even, they were still obviously struggling offensively, and they had just fought back to tie it with a little run. And then right out of the game, come starters, and in comes this group. And I just thought, boy, this feels to me like a stretch. We're in trouble.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they were in trouble.
Yeah. There's a part in the second half when it was Hogard, Holloman, Sissoko, and then I don't think even Joey was in. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it was Malik and
Akins, probably. Yeah.
So there weren't many scorers on the floor there either. And then Nebraska, I think, wisely went into zone, which, although maybe you could say, well, that may not be a good idea since Michigan State's been shooting the lights out with 3. But when you have Holloman and Hogard out there, if you can, and certainly, Sissoko's not going to hurt you. It limits your options, but even then, AJ was able to sort of attack, and with the pick and roll, they were still able to score even that.
I would maintain that the biggest part of that equation that I mentioned was not having AJ out there, even if he's struggling.
Yeah.
The reality is, when you have a point guard that can run your stuff that way and create opportunities for his teammates, that can elevate non-scorers into scorers, right?
Sure.
And so it was double faceted for me, two facets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One was just having all those guys there at the same time, but two was not having them with AJ.
Yeah.
Now you could say, well, Tyson can get his own, and Malik can score on the blocks, and that's true. But I would feel much better about a lineup like that having a chance for at least some success if the point guard is out there with him, the guy who's the best creator.
Yep. Yeah, and maybe that's one of those things where you're like, well, the other thing is you could say maybe AJ needed to sit out and just kind of watch the game for just a few minutes to kind of collect himself, because he wasn't playing well. I mean, no one was playing well, and maybe just reset. And it didn't help, obviously. They weren't any better when they later in the half. Although I guess they did make put up a little bit of fight to stay within contact going into the halftime.
Well, it was crucial because,
oh yeah, sure.
Honestly, I mean, that game felt like it was ready to tilt.
Yeah.
And if it had gone the other way in those last couple minutes and Nebraska had pushed it out to 18, 19, I don't know.
Yeah.
The fact that it was 12 and they actually had a chance to make it single digits if they'd hit a 3 on that last possession they got was remarkable. I wasn't kidding. I was stunned that they were only down 12 with how badly they'd played and how many good things Nebraska had done.
Yeah, they almost had it at 10 with that tip, and that was the horn just sounded before.
Well, that's what I mean. They had it right. They almost had it at 10, and if they'd hit a 3 on that possession, could have cut it to 9. They had a chance.
Yeah.
Really, really remarkable that they were that close. It was kind of almost hard to understand how, except that they did get a couple threes late. They got one from Akins, and I believe got another one from Hauser.
Right.
Late, and that helped them. But that was with AJ out there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, AJ. Yeah, and yeah, you could almost say AJ was not good the first 14 minutes of the game, and then after that,
he was better down the stretch.
Yeah, but they're playing from behind at that point, and still they were still sort of stuck in the mud. They've kind of it took them a while to sort of get out of that funk. Why don't we get to the keys of the game? We'll start though. Before that, one of the great sponsors of the show is the brothers that just do gutters. Kurt Stauffer and his team over in the west side of the state will help you get your gutters fixed up. If they're like mine, they're a disaster. I had trees growing in my gutters. I had water just.
Whoa!
Yeah, I actually had a tree growing.
Like tree from soil.
Yes.
Within the gutter itself.
Oh yeah. I actually had a tree.
How big?
Well, it's probably a foot tall. Foot and a half. It was one of those things. Well, in the summer you can.
It was just getting going.
Yeah, right. Well, what happens, of course, is the gutter's plugged up because it's got all the debris. I've got an elm tree. Surprisingly, I've got an elm tree right by my house, and the elm tree, it's avoid Dutch elm disease, which is a little surprising from west side of the state that with all the Dutch around here, you think you get Dutch elm disease. So anyway, it has, and this is my walkout basement. So it's a 2-story house. So it's like 3 stories up. There's no way I'm getting up on a ladder to go there. I've taken care of way too many people who've fallen from 1 story, much less 3.
Right.
So I'm not going to get up there to clean out the gutters. I had people do it, but they have to do it all the time because there's trees like hanging over there. All the stuff's, all the junk's falling in there all the time. And then I'm looking up there in the summer, like, looks like a stick. And then fall hits, like, that's not a stick. That's a stick with leaves on it. That's a tree growing. I'm sure the seeds fall in there and, whatever. So anyway, Kurt's team came out this spring, just a couple weeks ago, in the terrible weather. They fixed my gutters. They're too small. My roof's a little too big, and so when you buy a house, they kind of put the cheapest stuff on most of the time, and so I got really nice high quality gutters. I've got leaf guards on now, so I'm all set. They got the trees were thrown out of my gutter. In big clumps in the yard. And so they cleaned all that up. But I had standing water by my house. It was a mess. Those things really can cause problems to your foundation. They can cause all kinds of... So anyway, you got to get that stuff taken care of. Maybe you just need your gutters fixed. Maybe you just need them, just the leaf guards on. Maybe you just need them replaced. Whatever. They'll do it, and they'll give you 10% off if you tell Kurt Final Four. So go email him at kurt.stauffer. That's kurt.stauffer at brothersgutters.com. It's a great chain, a franchise, I should say, brothers that just do gutters. They just specialize only in doing gutters. And so they do as opposed to the sort of the handyman guy who comes by does it. These guys actually, they specialize in it, and they do fantastic work, really fast, insured, all that stuff.
It's also coming up to prime flooding season too, and I know from personal experience that's another issue that your gutters can be a major contributor to.
Yes. So it is. So you can't go wrong. Contact Kurt and his team. All right, so let's go do the 5 keys to the game. Brought to you by Nudge Printing in just a moment.
The midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. I love mixing it up by betting against the spread, taking the over on Giannis's points every chance I get, and more exclusive bets like the 2x3, 2 threes scored in the first 3 minutes. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine bets like those for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/BlueWire. That's FanDuel.com/BlueWire to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. 21 plus in select states. First online real money wager only. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable free bets that expires in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in New Jersey.
What's up, everybody? It's Kate and Michelle from Draft Queens, the podcast making sports and fantasy football more awesome for everybody.
We're coming to you weekly with NFL start-sit advice, breakdowns of the hottest sports headlines, and maybe even a few friendly sports bets.
So go on, follow Draft Queens now wherever you listen to podcasts as part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network.
All right, so the 5 keys to the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. I remind you, Nudge Printing are the company Gabe and his team with Brittany. They are spearheading, I think probably it's a fair thing to say, spearheading the Spartan Strong shirt sales. I know a lot of people on the Spartan Mag board have bought some. We have, of course, we do all things with Nudge Printing. They print our shirts. They print Michigan State shirts. We talked, and all kinds of different teams too, like Texas State, like Dom Leese we had on the bracketology last show. That's his alma mater. All the schools in the state of Michigan, pretty much all of them. Calvin and Central, Western, Eastern, Northern, Michigan Tech, Oakland, Wayne State. I think all maybe Albion. I'm trying to remember all the schools. They don't do Michigan because they're Spartan alums. They're not going to do that. They also have the vintage stuff. You can't go wrong. You can get the Spartan Strong shirts, which help support the shooting victims at Michigan State. So there are all kinds of things you can do to help out us, to help out the Michigan State community, and just help yourself out to have some nice, cool swag. So you can go get 20% off if you type in Final Four for a coupon code at checkout. So go to nudgeprinting.com, and you can also find a link to that in the show notes. All right, so the first key to the game for tonight was the defensive glass. And before we start, I just want to say, if someone has contacted Michigan State, like the athletics department and the guys who put together the stats, and they told them, you guys got to get this out sooner, we really appreciate it, because they actually had it out. Usually we have to wait like almost 45 minutes before the stats came out. They were out right away, which is amazing. So whoever, if you were the one who pulled that off, kudos to you, and make sure you keep it up. So Michigan State only allowed 16.7% offensive rebounding percentage from Nebraska, which is fantastic. Nebraska just had 4. It felt like a million because the couple they had, I think they scored on in the first half and kind of hurt. But they totally limited Nebraska. And then surprisingly, Michigan State, which is not a very good offensive rebounding team, got 34% of their misses. So really good game on both ends.
It's the only thing that you could point to as a real positive. And that turnovers were reasonably low. Those were the only 2 things in the first half. But yeah, look, Nebraska, we're not going to fool anybody. Nebraska's not a good rebounding team at either end.
No.
And you could see why. They have to go small. They were creeping up toward respectability when they still had Juwan Gary. And then when he got hurt and his season was over, it made it into a situation where they had to go extremely small. And you saw that with Wilcher operating as the 4-man for a lot of this game. They'd get Breedenbach in there for a little bit. But for the most part, it was Wilcher. He was like 6'5". And as I think you could tell, and I mentioned this in our pregame, he's not one of those 6'5", undersized 4-men who play bigger than their size. He's a guard.
Yeah.
They've got 4. The biggest guy they've got, actually, unfortunately for them, is the point guard, Griesel, who did do a nice job rebounding in this game. But it's tough when your point guard is that guy. Tough for a point guard to really impact the game in a massive way on the offensive boards.
Yeah,
Sometimes they can do it defensively, but offensively, because of where they typically are on the court, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
So Nebraska is not a good rebounding team, but look, Michigan State got whipped by a Michigan team that's not a very good rebounding team.
Mm-hmm.
So, we've seen it, but it's still good to see Michigan State respond and deliver, especially, both ends, but especially I think on the defensive glass was important, because with the way Nebraska shot, even with the improved defense Michigan State played in the second half, Nebraska still shot a tick over 50% from the floor on the game. So when a team's shooting that well, boy, you better not give them second chances.
Yeah, right.
And they did.
And the splits for this game, the game in the first half, Nebraska 58%, and second half 43.5%. So I mean,
right,
definitely
big difference,
right? Okay, so the second key to the game, the threes. I don't know. Did Michigan State shoot the threes well, Rod? I think they did. You might not have known it the first half.
Yeah, but that's the thing. The first half probably felt a little worse than it actually was because they had that period where they just couldn't buy one.
I mean, they're like 1 for 9, right?
Looks with good shooters, yeah. And then they got those two fairly late in the second half. Again, another one from Hauser, and I believe Akins hit his during that stretch, his first half three. So they were 4 for 12. Not great, but not a disaster. 33%, okay. On the road, not a totally unreasonable performance. And the volume was okay. That was the other thing I liked about it.
Yeah.
Second half, though, as we talked about, just
12,
crazy.
12 that was 17.
That was as good a half of 3-point shooting as you're going to see.
Yeah. I think they have to replace those nets. I think those nets melted.
Well, because that's the thing. It's the percentage, 70.6%. So we'll call it 71%. You'll rarely see a team shoot 71% from three. You'll especially rarely see them do it on volume like that. Michigan State took 17 threes in the second half. That's a game for them frequently.
Yeah, right.
In terms of volume. So they've shot pretty consistently well all year long, but there has been an uptick of late. For as much as I talked about the defense lately had really started to wobble, I think at the other end, I think Michigan State has hit 80 points at least. Is this 4 in a row?
Let's see.
3?
Indiana,
I can't remember
Iowa,
whether they topped
Nebraska.
They didn't top 80 against Michigan,
no, they
right?
Didn't. Because they hadn't hit 80 since like Buffalo until the Indiana game.
But the Michigan game actually was not a bad offensive performance by MSU.
No, they were pretty good. Yeah.
So the offense as a whole, which had really struggled, has been coming. I mentioned this maybe on the Spartan Mag board that in the last maybe 2.5 weeks, they've gone from somewhere in the 70s in terms of offensive efficiency to I think they were at number 52.
Yeah, they'll be up now
heading into this game, and they're going to be up. Yeah, you would think they'll be somewhere in the 40s.
Yeah.
After this one, so they're getting much better play at that end. 3-point shooting is not the only aspect of that, but it is a big aspect of that. And they came into this game, I believe, shooting 37.5 or 38.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah, 38% around there. Yeah.
And top 15. I think they were 14th in the country. And that's obviously going to go up maybe considerably because, again,
big volume.
It's the percentage, but man, the volume.
Yeah, 29 threes.
Is good. Yeah. So, very, very, very important.
Most games, you'd say 29 threes. And I would say, okay, let me back up. Most years, you'd say for Michigan State, 29 threes, it's a little high. They usually want to attack inside, but that's just not this team, right? And so you're not as upset with a 29. They had as many 3-point attempts as they'd had. I mean, they only had 13 makes inside the arc this game, which is pretty surprising. And then the other part,
and as contrast, Nebraska only shoots 7 for 23.
Yeah, I was going to say
for the game,
good,
and they were 3 for 12 in the second half.
So they shot their average, right? They shot about 30%.
Yeah, although a little bit below their average at home.
Right.
They're about 33% at home. They shot 30. But you're right. Their overall seasonal average, they were right there. So, it felt worse than that in that first half. And there were stretches where it felt like, oh God, is Tominaga ever going to miss? But, for as much as he did, and look, he had a great game. I mean, he ended up with 20 points, but he only took 11 shots.
Right. Thank goodness.
And right now, I'd consider that a victory with the way that guy's shooting.
The one other thing I want to mention before we go to the next key is we talk about that offensive efficiency, and talking to Dominic, I guess I didn't really appreciate the importance of metrics in the seeding process, right? I think that was one of the things that he said was important because, you're either in the field, you're not on the field. And then they obviously base it on how many wins you have, but also the metrics plays a role in sort of where you're on the seed line. So if you improve your offensive efficiency, you're actually probably going to be able to move up a little bit higher too, potentially in the seed line as well.
Well, here's the thing. I think what really impacts that, and this is what feeds into the overall number that drives your Ken Palm overall efficiency is the contrast between your offensive efficiency and your defensive efficiency. So I don't know how much of a boost Michigan State has gotten, because while their offense has clearly improved, their defense has also slipped. There was a point they were in the top 20 nationally in defense, and I believe they were 32nd or 33rd coming into this game, and they're probably going to decline coming out of this game defensively. So I don't know, but you make a good point. It was a very important point that I think he made, that you've got it. People talk about things like net and Ken Palm and Torvik, all these things as if they're interchangeable. They're really not. And I think if you look over history, you will find that he's correct. Where net makes an impact is two main areas, to some extent getting into the field, although there can be exceptions there. We talked about number 77 Rutgers getting in last year. So it's not like there's a hard and fast. But generally speaking, it's going to be sorting out who's in, who's out, and then also using it to assign the importance of wins and losses, quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4.
Yeah.
Right. That's where it matters. But once you've got that sorted out, and again, that's mostly, not entirely, but mostly, I think that element is used for determining in or out. It would have some impact on the seeding, but I think where you see the seeding impact is in the either of the other types, which is the evaluation methods like KPI, where they're just measuring what you've done to date, what your resume says you are, and then the predictive ones like Ken Palm.
Yeah, right.
That's where it comes. So that's where what you're talking about really comes into play, is in seeding discussions.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of a boost Michigan State gets from this. I think where Michigan State does get potentially a little bit of help, perhaps, is that a road win over a quad 2 team is going to at least help boost a little bit. I had this discussion today on the Spartan Mag board, people talking about, can Michigan State still get a 6 seed? And we talked about that with our guest, right?
Yeah.
And it seems to me that if they were to win the game they just played, beat Ohio State at Breslin, and then win the first Big Ten tournament game at least, they'd have a shot. And if they win 2 Big Ten tournament games, depending upon what others do, they might have a very good shot. But one of the reasons that I think it's going to be tough is the most optimistic brackets from a Michigan State perspective, and his was one of them, seem to have Michigan State in that last 7 seed spot. So that you think, all they got to do is go up to a 6. You just got to move up 1 seed, but they've really got to leapfrog 4 teams.
Right. And a lot of them are in the Big Ten.
They got to move up 4 spots. Some of them are in the Big Ten, but you got to leapfrog 4 teams.
Yep.
And that's not necessarily going to be an easy thing to do. It would have been, the dream would have been dead if they'd lost this one.
Oh yeah, I think so for sure. Yeah.
For that. But the other thing that's really important about this and the impact of that road win is, I think it further inoculates you from slipping too far. You can put like a 10 seed out of your mind and probably even put a 9 seed out of your mind at this point. I think the question right now is between 8, 7, and 6, more realistically.
Yeah.
In part because of what they did tonight.
I think I totally agree. So the third key to the game is Kisei Tominaga. He was really great. I mean, he had 20 points. He was 4 for 8 for 3, 2 for 3 from the line, 7-11 from the field. And like you mentioned, only 11 free field goal attempts. He played 30 minutes. And I guess during that crazy, 35-6 run that Michigan State went on in the end, or whatever it was, I feel like he wasn't on the floor much, but he must have been. And he was just quiet and then he was just
was in and out.
And then he was out again. He came back in after under the under 12. I remember that for sure. And then he must have gone out, but he was just not impactful. They did a good job of, Walker was running like a maniac trying to chase that guy around everywhere, and for the most part did a pretty good job.
He got hurt. If you remember, there was a sequence. I'm trying to remember.
Okay, that's what I thought, but they didn't talk about it anymore. Like if it was like his foot or something.
He got hurt, came out, and then if you remember, there was that time where he was hobbling. Yeah, I think it was his left leg. He was hobbling a little bit, and there was that segment where he was off the floor, and then he had moved up on the bench right by the coaches, and they went to a timeout, and they assumed that he was going to come right back in, but he didn't.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of.
And then he did come in after that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that did have something to do with slowing him down. But on the other side of things, I thought Michigan State was still, when he was on the floor, they were really good at much, much better than they were in the first half in staying with him, largely Tyson Walker, staying with him on the catch.
Yeah.
Because you saw in this game, man, if you give that guy a sliver, it's in rhythm, not in rhythm, doesn't matter. He's going to take it, and the zone he is in right now. I mean, again, in this game, I'm talking about it like they did a reasonably good job in the second half. He still ended up with 20 points. He still ended up, 7 for 11 from the floor and 4 for 8 from 3. So he's a hell of a player. I'll tell you this. Yeah. I hope he leaves. They were talking about that during the broadcast, as that he's a guy who has the option, I think, to take a COVID year. Some of their other guys are going to lose. But he could come back, and man, if he comes back, I think he's found, last year he gave them some scoring punch, but we talked about this in the pregame. We talked about it in the first game.
Yeah.
He was just wild. I mean, there was no rhyme or reason to his game. He was basically just a sniper, and he would pull from anywhere at any time. And sometimes he'd hit, but his efficiency wasn't great. And this year it's become a different deal.
Yeah.
Especially over the last, month or so. He's just been phenomenal. And boy, if he does come back and he can keep this rhythm going into the off season, and I think he's got a chance, because what he's shown, and he showed it in this game, is it's no longer just about threes. He's gone from a guy who last year 2/3 of his shots were from 3. This year, 50%. Now, tonight, it was a little more tilted toward the threes, but we saw him do damage, back cutting people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He got a couple layups, 3 layups. Yep.
He can do that stuff, and continue to be a 40% plus kind of shooter from 3, which I think he can. Look out, because he would give them something that Hoiberg has not had at all. And that is a veteran, productive perimeter player who gives them real meaningful point scoring from the arc.
Yeah.
But can also do other things too. We've talked about it, where it's just this constant, every year it's a rebuild, and getting a guy like Tominaga to come back. And then you add in, Lawrence played very well, I thought, in this game, and it's a freshman, and he's getting better as his role has expanded out of necessity. He's getting better. He played a really good game against Minnesota in their last one. He was in double digits. He's 15 points tonight. You have those two guys. They may not strike you as superstars, but that would be a hell of a foundation for Fred Hoiberg to start with going into next season.
We had a Tominaga listed as a junior. Was that inaccurate, or is it some sort of weird thing because he came from transfer?
He's actually played. It has to do, I believe, with the COVID year.
Okay, gotcha.
So he went through senior night tonight. His parents were
I
there,
saw that. Yeah,
but there's been no decision apparently.
Okay.
So if he got, and honestly, for a guy like that, with the run he's been on, and Lincoln is, and you see it every year with Nebraska, even when they've been god awful,
they're still fun place.
Still turn out.
Yeah, looks like
they still turn out, and it's
what else?
Is there to do in Lincoln?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I would extend that to what else are you going to do in the entire state? It's one of my least favorite states in the union, right next to Iowa, because it's the same thing. You're driving across them, and it's just endless horizon, just flat.
Yeah,
that's all you've got.
And you cross the Platte River 25 times on I-80.
Yeah. So they don't have anything else to do, but who cares? The fact is, they've got strong fan support, and I would think if Tominaga comes back, that's a situation where maybe, and I don't know a great deal about what Nebraska's NIL program is like, but I've got to believe it's at least competitive. That's a situation where a guy like him really could look at, hey, I play one more year, it's going to help me develop, and I can make decent money.
Sure.
Comparable to what I might make in a first contract overseas.
Yeah.
That given the way he's been going, I would think he would have a chance to pull in some decent NIL dollars.
Well,
that would be my assumption.
Nothing's going on in the football field for Nebraska for years, so maybe maybe you can get some basketball money going. So the fourth key to the game is post play. We already talked about this plenty. Derek Walker was 5-5 to start the game, finished 1-4 the rest of the way with a free throw, only 5 rebounds, 2 offensive, 3 assists, 3 turnovers. He had a couple blocks, finished with 13 points. It's a decent game, but he was not causing real problems, especially in the second half when Michigan State just went on that huge run. So they did a good job of disrupting him.
The concern you have when you're going up against Nebraska is Derek Walker has shown it against Michigan State and against other programs that he is capable of, I'm not going to say taking a game over, but really impacting a game. And he can do that in a couple ways. He does that with his play in the low post, and he does that as a rebounder. Now, he had an efficient game, but you said Michigan State was much better against him in the second half. There was one segment I loved where he was backing the ball into the middle of the lane, and Marty just stayed tall, stayed long, didn't jump into him, didn't try to block the shot, just stayed long and forced Walker into a miss. And then there was another one where Jackson Kohler got one of his block shots by just staying down and not overcommitting, not gambling, not getting rushed. So they did a much better job in the second half. But again, the number that mattered the most to me was the 9. He didn't get a lot of attempts, and that's because Michigan State did a pretty good job in limiting his opportunities to score, and then holding him to 5 rebounds is a big deal. This is a guy who averages, I think it's over 8 a game.
Yeah. 7.2 a game. Yep.
Okay. So 7 a game. So you hold him 2 under his average. Yeah. That's doing good work.
Yeah. Finally, the mentality. I think, I guess you can't know, but it certainly looked like a team that lacked a little confidence, or might have been okay for the first few minutes. And then once they started missing a couple shots, it sort of snowballed. Was that a holdover from the Iowa game? Hard to say. But whatever they did, they shook it off near the end of the first half, and then definitely carried that in the second half. And we're, fine, I guess you'd say.
Well, we know this much. Whatever the cause of the first half was, by the time they got to the second, Michigan State clearly did not show any ill effects in terms of their confidence. So whether the first half was produced by Iowa hangover or not, that's open to speculation. I tend to think it probably was some of that. Not that they came out of the gate, woe is me, but once things started to go badly,
exactly,
they were missing some shots. That's when I think it crept in there. But boy, whatever they did at halftime, and Izzo seemed to attribute a lot of it to AJ Hogarth taking ownership and coming out and deciding to put that team kind of on his back and make things happen offensively, create plays for his shooters. It worked. And you see what a massive, massive deal confidence is in both directions for Michigan State. And we have seen so many examples of this just in the last few days. Again, both directions. This is the other thing I wanted to say about this game too, though. I don't have a way of measuring this objectively. So I'm not even going to pretend to try, but anecdotally, it has seemed to me that we have seen more wild swings both within games, so, big comebacks, and from game to game, certainly in the Big Ten. I would argue nationally too, but certainly within the Big Ten, we've seen this. If you look at a team like Indiana goes into West Lafayette and beats Purdue over the weekend, right?
Sweep.
Huge game. And they're coming home against Iowa, a team that doesn't perform very well on the road. and Iowa smacked them, absolutely beat them down. Explain that. I think the explanation is, and I'm going to limit this to the Big Ten. I think the focus has been wrong in some quarters because a lot of people, the Big Ten's so mediocre, even though it's probably the second toughest league in the country by most measures. I think most of the focus is everybody's so bad. I would say everybody's flawed, but everybody's at least decent to good too.
Yeah.
In some important ways. And so you don't have a lot of teams in the Big Ten that you look at and say, well, they just can't, they can't score. They don't have guys that can carry a team with it. Look at Big Ten rosters, and even on Penn State's I guess the third worst team in the league right now. Penn State and Wisconsin, maybe.
Yeah, I suppose.
Both of those teams have absolute weapons that on a given night could destroy you. I mean, Pickett, I think, in a 40-point plus game, right? Or 30-point plus recently. Wisconsin's got guys that can put up big numbers on a given night. So my point is, I think it's played out pretty much the way we thought it would in the preseason, in that there just isn't very much separation between anybody. And I think we've gotten to the point that you can probably put Purdue in that category too, despite the fact of how they're viewed and where they're going to be seated. I think we found out that Purdue's not really that much better than anybody else either in this league when push comes to shove. They're still the best team, sure, but marginally so. And certainly capable of being beaten by any one of a host of teams on a given day. But I think that's part of it, is that you saw in this game, Michigan State comes out in the first half, and we see all the worst things. When this team can't hit shots, when they're not hitting jumpers, it can be a tough watch because they don't get things going offensively, and it's a struggle. And then I think it maybe impacted their defense too, something Coach Garland talks about a lot. Is one side letting one side's performance affect the other. And then we see in the second half, they just are insane. One of the best 3-point shooting performances we've ever seen in a half from a Michigan State team. So what that tells you is they are flawed, but they are also capable of playing very, very well. That's not normally how it is. I don't know if people are fully appreciating that. And this is not just a Michigan State thing. This is true of a lot of teams where, they've got problems. They've got issues, which means they're never likely going to be great. But they also do enough things well that they are a threat to beat anybody on any given day. And that's what explains what we are seeing in the Big Ten when you look at the standings, as much as anything else to me. And we saw it tonight.
Yep.
You want to talk about tale of two halves? It was about as stark a difference as you're ever going to see.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's the league. That's the league. That's pretty much every team. Minnesota is a negative exception in that sense. I think Ohio State is too, to a lesser degree.
That's about it. Yeah.
But everybody else, that's what I think.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. And, so the win tonight by Michigan State prevents them from once again from having to play on Wednesday. So they'll still have never played in those first four matchups. So they avoid that again, which is great news. They're almost certainly, I guess I haven't looked at the possibilities, but I can't imagine they're not going to be playing on Thursday night. I imagine they'll be playing Thursday at some point. I don't think they can get a double bye, but I haven't worked all the scenarios.
They're out of it.
Because the best they can be is 11-8, which I guess some other. Well, I guess you'd have to look at. They could theoretically get there, but I don't think it's going to happen. There's probably more teams that have to lose each other, and so that probably can't happen.
And you would be factoring in tiebreakers. And just the last time I looked at it, it didn't seem like Michigan State was in great shape in that respect.
Well, Michigan State will have no tiebreakers because they'll have one less game. So They won't have any tiebreakers with anybody.
Oh, right. You're right.
So,
You're right.
So I don't know. They'll have
so that's a good point.
So anyway, I'm not going to bother working those things out. It'll all work itself out in about 5 days, and we'll know exactly what they are. But I think we can.
I think you're right about Thursday.
I think we confidently say that going into, if they take care of business on Saturday, and then you don't know who, because you don't know what your seeding is. You're either playing like an 8-9 game maybe, or you're playing one of the lousy teams lower down. Like a Penn State or Nebraska or Wisconsin, maybe Ohio State, I suppose. There's no way Minnesota's making out the first round. But so you may have a game that's not going to be very helpful. You may have a quad three.
But I'll tell you something. If it would be the most fitting thing about this season in the Big Ten, if Minnesota were to rise up and beat somebody. I would give it a very small chance just because of how truly bad they are, but I wouldn't say it's 0.
Yeah, I mean, you could say
not when you're talking about
could it be Wisconsin?
Wisconsin
sure.
And Penn State. Yeah, those teams, they've made mistakes this year at times.
Yeah,
right. So, and Minnesota, for as bad as they've been, they've got 2 guys. Kind of what I was talking about a minute ago. They've got 2 guys in Dawson Garcia and Jamison Battle.
Yeah.
Now, Jamison Battle's had a bad year, but is it possible that he could catch fire for one day and be the guy he was last season and carry them? Yeah. Could Garcia, who's had a decent year offensively, just explode for one afternoon? Yeah. You can't rule those things out. So, but yeah, realistically, you're probably talking about you're definitely talking about Thursday. I'm with you. I don't see how they I don't see the path to the double bye. Most likely, although I guess you never know.
Yeah.
Is anybody sitting on 12 wins other than Purdue? They're not, right?
No, that's the thing. Like, and again, I don't know who plays who, and somebody's got to have to win some of these games. Look, I'm sure someone's actually figured it out.
Michigan's one of those teams sitting at 11, and I think that's where they stop.
They're 11-7.
I don't think they're beating Illinois or Indiana on the road. I think they've gotten a really bad set of outcomes because Illinois is coming in off losing to Ohio State. I suspect they're going to be angry. And Indiana, what happened to them today, I don't think there's going to be a repeat. If you wanted a scenario that ensured that they were locked in and focused, this was it. So if you're a Michigan fan, I don't think you're very happy.
And Iowa will host Nebraska, so they'll probably end up 12-8. And so I think you've got
Iowa has 11 wins now.
Yeah, they're 11.
Oh God, they do.
Yeah, so it'll be
they went from being 9-9 if the game at Iowa City turned out the way it should have.
Yeah.
To 11-8, and you're right, 12-8. So they'll probably be a 12-win team. Not sure who Northwestern closes with, but in any event, I still think it's unlikely that Michigan State. I don't see the path.
Yeah, Northwestern finishes with
Thursday
at Rutgers, I think.
Yeah,
or Penn State.
Probably Thursday, but it would seem to me that almost certainly they are going to be playing a very competitive game because all of these games should, in theory, be competitive, and that's where what I was just talking about comes into play. Are you playing? Are the good things about your team showing up in sufficient amounts that they allow you to win a game, or are your flaws more pronounced on a given night and you lose? And I really think that's been the story, and every team in that mix is capable of having those good things that they do show up.
Absolutely.
So it's going to be wild. There's no way to handicap this thing.
I'm looking forward to it.
I mean, it's been a rarity. And somebody asked this question on a message board, and I didn't have the answer handy. You might remember, did that year where Iowa won the Big Ten tournament, this goes back a while, under Alford, were they were in the Thursday game that year, right?
Correct.
They must have been.
Yes.
So it's happened that time. I'm wondering if there have been any other occasions, but it's pretty remarkable that for as many times as the Big Ten tournament has been played, we very rarely see that bid stealer scenario we were talking about in the bracket.
I don't think it's ever happened.
Well, it happened with Iowa.
But I think they're going to be in the field anyway. that year.
Okay, but I'm just saying, even extend it further. Maybe not a bid stealer scenario, but
someone coming out
team
of
playing the Thursday game,
like a six seed winning it or something like that.
Right. I'm thinking it's happened
It has
more
to have
often
happened.
than that,
Yeah.
but not a lot. So normally you would feel pretty confident in saying, well, look, it's going to be one of those top 4 teams.
Yeah.
This year, come on. There's no way.
There's
no way to handicap this.
And I think when Iowa won it last year, they played on Thursday.
That's it. So okay, so they've done it a couple times.
Yeah, I mean,
at least.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I think it's happened. I almost feel like in the Big Ten tournament, the 1 seed doesn't win that often.
It's not that the 1 seed dominates, but it's one of those Friday teams.
Yeah, I suppose
that's pretty consistently been the.
We'd
pattern,
have to look it up.
if
I
you
guess.
Look.
But there's
not a.
You guess that'd be
I'm
the case.
confident in saying there's not a lot.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of it.
We only had that 1 year with Illinois, came all the way from the Wednesday game, and they played the finals and got destroyed by Michigan State, where they just had dead legs.
Right.
That was the only time I think there's an actual automatic qualifier.
Well, in those days, I think it was just a Thursday game. We didn't have the Wednesday games.
You might be right.
Yet.
Yeah, you might be right then.
Yeah, that was early on in the tournament. But in any event, my point in all of this is, normally that's the scenario. Normally you look at it, you say, well, the extra day's rest plus quality of the teams almost always means it's a Friday team that's going to win it. You don't know which one, but a Friday team's going to win it. That's, I don't know how you handicap this thing, because now you got everybody on neutral floors. So you're taking home court out of it. These games, almost any game you could have, other than games that Ohio State and Minnesota are participating in, to me, are reasonably considered to be toss-ups.
Sure, and I would even say Ohio State could beat someone.
They
they're
could.
Just
I'm just saying most everybody would be favored against them, but not by a ton.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, whereas the rest of these games, seriously, I'll be interested to see what the KenPom spreads tell us when we get to that point, because I have a feeling it's going to be a whole lot of 1 point spreads, 1 or 2 at the most, so it's going to be wild. And what impact that has, as our bracketologist friend, Dom, told us, probably not much impact, other than you can do yourself some good if you get to play Saturday, not necessarily the result you get on Saturday,
right?
But if you get to Saturday, you get to a semifinal,
because you've won a quad 1 game, most likely to get that, and it adds most likely to your resume. Yeah,
and you got at least 1, and if you're in Michigan State situation, you probably won 2 games to get there. You might have 2 quad 1 wins, or a quad 2 and a quad 1.
Yeah,
which would help.
Yeah.
So it remains to be seen, but I think it's going to be a wild week in that sense. I expect that there are going to be some crazy games, very competitive, and it should be a lot of fun from that perspective. But bringing it back around to tonight, I think as a Michigan State fan, the biggest takeaway for me is the resiliency.
Yeah, I was going to say, this team was on the mats, right?
Once again,
yep,
they responded. They said, we're not going out like this. We are better than this. We're going to show that. And they came out and they found a way to up their energy, up their effort, and absolutely up their execution.
It's just like the Penn State game, right? It's like you got beaten by Northwestern at home. You had every reason to go 0-2. You go and you win a road game in Penn State, a game that you had no business winning in some ways. And they did the same thing tonight, where they kind of had no business winning this game, and they just had to play great in the second half, and they did, and pulled it out.
Well, I would say I don't quite get to that last conclusion. I absolutely think in totality, if you look at the 40 minutes, Michigan State was clearly the better team.
Oh, no question.
Yeah, but normally, you play a first half like that, you're not going anywhere.
Right, exactly.
So full credit to them for the response. And so now you go into senior day on Saturday against Ohio State, and you take care of business there. Look, here's what it would mean. You're 11-8 in the league. We would assume they would have found a way to beat Minnesota at home. So this could have been a 12-8 team in the league. That's, given everything they've gone through, The injuries, the incident on campus, just a lot of stuff thrown at them. I don't think that's a bad performance. And in a year where, yes, you could say the Big Ten did not have dominant teams at the top as we usually see, but man, if there was ever a season where the old cliche about, hey, any given night,
there's no rest.
Every team in this, you just didn't get breaks. You were not playing garbage teams. And the one garbage team there was, MSU didn't get to play.
Yeah.
Pretty good overall. I'm not saying this is an all-time great performance by any stretch, but I think you can feel okay with that as a Michigan State fan. And I also think that it would solidify what my overall impression has been of this team, which is at least through the regular season, they are improved from the last 2 years.
No question.
Now, do they continue into the postseason and play well? Because those teams actually both, I think, found another, particularly last year, found another gear when they got to the postseason. Can this team do that? And if they can, they could do some damage before it's over.
Yeah, you feel it's lurking there, right? It's like there's a potential there, and we'll have to see what happens.
But the other end of it, if you want to look at the glass half empty side,
first half
is you look at the first half. You look at the way they closed the game against Iowa. That was another thing too, before we go, that we should probably mention. And I think you said it. Once they got the lead in this game, they just didn't let it go. They didn't turn back.
Right. And
that was absolutely true. What a contrast to what happened in Iowa City, in the way MSU took care of it. Now, I do want to mention this and I'll ask you and see what you think. Were you surprised by the way Fred Hoiberg opted to play those last, say, 3 minutes?
He kind of gave up.
Because I was. Yeah.
Didn't press.
There was never.
But I don't know.
Didn't press. Didn't
foul. I mean,
didn't really foul.
Yeah.
And he had guys, he had a couple guys with 4, but he had guys that could have been designated foulers. If it's funny because it makes you wonder how cognizant was he, and it may just be that he doesn't like that approach.
Maybe,
but how cognizant was he of what Iowa was able to do by just extending the game that way? It was very surprising to me to see them not put Michigan State to the test, because you would think coming off a fold job like that you would say, hey, I want to see if they can handle it any better this time. Press them, see if you can force a turnover. If you can't, foul them quickly. Let's see them step to the line. Now, at the other end, Nebraska did absolutely zero offensively, so it likely wouldn't have mattered. But you never know. I was a little bit surprised to see that.
Yeah, you think it would have tested their mental fortitude after the collapse. Yeah. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, it was a strange decision, but maybe there's other stuff going on that we're just not aware of with Nebraska stuff.
Could be.
All right, well, let's get out of here. I want to remind you to support our show by supporting our sponsors. That'd be Nudge Printing. Go to nudgeprinting.com. 20% off checkout by typing Final 4 into the coupon code. And also the brothers that just do gutters out on the west side of the state. In the basically Grand Rapids area out to Holland, Saugatuck. You can get a hold of Kurt Stauffer and his team to take care of all those things now that spring is coming and the rain is about to fall when it stops being snow. Anyway, until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.